Good evening, dear listener, and welcome. Tonight we journey to a place where secrets whisper in the drafty halls, and where shadows linger longer than the candlelight. You are invited to accompany the most celebrated of detectives, Monsieur Hercule Poirot, as he ventures into the heart of an ancient English estate, Greystone Manor. It is the autumn of 1931. The skies above Devonshire hang heavy with a weeping mist, while the manor itself looms from the fog like some great sentinel, its ivy-clad towers hiding more than they reveal. Within its walls, a company of seemingly genteel souls has gathered for a weekend retreat, yet beneath their civilized manners lies a pact, a forbidden promise, and soon a crime most foul. Take your seat by the crackling fire. Pour yourself a measure of something fortifying, and lean closer, my friend, for the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot are about to be summoned once again. And now, let us begin. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The wind came first, rolling in long, mournful sighs across the wild Devon moors, rattling the shutters of Greystone Manor as though some unseen hand longed to be let inside. Dusk was falling, a dusk heavy with drizzle and mist, the kind that blurred the horizon and gave to the ancient house the aspect of a ghostly sentinel, standing guard over centuries of secrets. Greystone Manor had been built to intimidate as much as to shelter, its grey stone towers rising sheer from the earth, wrapped in ivy that clung as stubbornly as the past clung to those who now gathered within. In the grand hall, the air was thick with the mingled scents of polished oak, damp wool coats, and wood smoke from the enormous fireplace. A great chandelier, dimmed by the storm's gloom, cast shadows that seemed to bend and lean with the wind. It was into this brooding atmosphere that a small, neat figure entered, hat precisely angled, moustache immaculate, shoes gleaming despite the mud outside. Monsieur Hercule Poirot had arrived. He paused at the threshold, his sharp eyes surveying all with a glance that seemed, to the casual observer, no more than polite curiosity. Yet, within that glance he measured everything, the nervous laughter echoing of one accustomed to obedience. He welcomed Poirot with outstretched hands, though the gesture was more theatrical than sincere. "My dear Monsieur Poirot, what an honor. I trust the rain has not dampened your spirits? Come, you must take a brandy. The evening promises to be most diverting." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Sir Reginald. The journey, though wet, has been agreeable enough. But tell me, what is the occasion that assembles so distinguished a company in so remote a place?" Sir Reginald chuckled, a dry sound. "All in good time. Tonight we are but friends gathered for dinner and conversation. Tomorrow, perhaps, I shall share more." He turned away, the subject closed. The guests had already begun to assemble in the drawing-room, where firelight danced across velvet draperies and gilded frames. They were a diverse collection, bound together by threads invisible yet unmistakable to Poirot's eye. Nearest the hearth stood Lady Eleanor Ashcroft, the host's wife. Elegant, even statuesque, she wore her beauty like armor, her dark hair perfectly arranged, her gown of deep burgundy chosen to impress rather than to please. There was a sharpness to her every movement, as though each gesture had been rehearsed for the stage. Yet beneath her poise, Poirot detected brittleness, the faint tremor of a woman whose life had become a performance from which she could not escape. By the window, his heavy frame outlined against the storm, loomed Major Henry Blackwood. Once a soldier of some renown, he carried himself with the rigid pride of the officer, yet his shoulders sagged in moments when he thought no one looked. His mustache bristled, his jaw clenched, his hands perpetually tightening and loosening, as though in rehearsal for some invisible duel. His eyes betrayed sleeplessness, and perhaps guilt. In a corner, perched on the edge of a chair as though uncertain she belonged, sat Miss Clara Whitmore. Barely 24, she possessed a delicate prettiness, though her pallor spoke of long years under oppressive guardianship. Orphaned young and taken as Sir Reginald's ward, she was timid to the point of invisibility, her words few and softly spoken, yet her gaze, furtive though it was, revealed an intelligence quick and searching, as though she were always listening. Eyes lined with kohl, she moved with theatrical grace, as though the floorboards themselves were her stage. Known in certain circles as a medium of renown, she had a voice low and velvety, each word uttered as if it bore significance. Some saw mystery, others saw deception. To Poirot, she was both intrigue and enigma. Thus assembled, the company made an uneasy tableau, each one distinct, yet bound together by invisible threads. Poirot, sipping his brandy with delicate precision, took his place among them, his little gray cells already busy. The conversation over dinner flowed with the strained gaiety of people who share more than they wish to confess. Sir Reginald presided, glass never empty, his voice filling the gaps. He spoke of his years abroad, of judgments passed, of fortunes made and lost. But always there was an undercurrent, an insinuation, that he knew more of those around him than they cared to admit. At one point his gaze settled on Major Blackwood. "Ah, Henry," he said, with a smile too sharp to be kind. "Do you recall Calcutta? That little game of chance? The wager that grew rather beyond your means? I dare say such matters are best forgotten, unless, of course, one insists on remembering." The Major's face darkened, his jaw working silently. He muttered something about bygones and refilled his glass. Later, Sir Reginald turned to Madame Duval. "And you, my dear lady, your séances, your voices from beyond. How the gullible flock to such theater. But I recall another performance, in Bombay, was it not? A performance best left unspoken, unless one wishes it broadcast." Madame Duval's lips curved into a smile, but her knuckles whitened around her glass. "Monsieur," she replied, her accent lingering on every syllable, "there are secrets that belong to the dead. Best not to disturb them." Poirot, watching closely, observed Lady Eleanor's hand tremble as she lifted her fork, though her expression remained serenely aloof. Clara, meanwhile, had grown pale, her eyes lowered to her plate, as though she wished to vanish into it. Dr. Pembroke dabbed his brow with a handkerchief, laughing a shade too loudly at Sir Reginald's remarks. It was, Poirot reflected, a dinner heavy with trust. "I shall not hesitate to speak, to reveal, to destroy if necessary." He raised his glass high, the amber liquid catching the light like fire. "To our pact, to its secrets, and to the consequences of betrayal." The toast was met with hesitation, glasses raised slowly, eyes darting. Poirot, though he lifted his glass, did not drink. He was too busy observing the blanching of Miss Whitmore's cheeks, the tightening of Blackwood's grip on his glass, the faint, controlled breath of Lady Eleanor, the darting eyes of Dr. Pembroke, and the cold, unreadable smile of Madame Duval. The storm howled against the windows as though echoing the unease within, and Poirot, sipping delicately, thought to himself, "Here is a house filled with shadows, and where shadows gather, there too, inevitably, comes murder." Chapter 2. The Forbidden Pact. The storm had gathered its full fury by the time the company adjourned from dinner to the drawing-room. Rain lashed against the tall, mullioned windows, streaking the glass with silver rivulets, while wind rattled the shutters so violently that one might almost imagine unseen hands clawing to be let inside. A log snapped in the great hearth, sending a shower of sparks into the air, and shadows leapt madly across the carved oak paneling. Within those walls there was warmth, wine, and the glitter of candlelight upon crystal. But beneath the surface unease curled like smoke, intangible yet suffocating. Poirot sat apart in a high-backed chair, his small, neat frame at once unobtrusive and commanding. His eyes, dark and alert, moved with deliberate leisure from one guest to another, noting the smallest tremor, the faintest twitch of muscle, the suppressed sighs that betrayed a mind ill at ease. He did not interrupt their chatter. He let it unfold, thin and forced, like a play performed by actors too weary of their roles. Sir Reginald dominated the room. Brandy in hand, cheeks ruddy, he moved among his guests as a general inspecting his troops. He spoke loudly, laughed heartily, clapped backs with the force of a man who wished to demonstrate his vitality. Yet behind the bravado lingered something more sinister. Herself at a writing desk, her slender form dwarfed by its vastness. She fingered a book absent-mindedly, her pale face turned toward the storm. She looked fragile, almost spectral, as though the slightest breath might scatter her. Yet Poirot saw her eyes dart, quick as a sparrow's, to every speaker, drinking in words and tones, even as her lips remained sealed. Dr. Pembroke sprawled comfortably in a leather armchair, his jovial manner louder than ever. He laughed, he reminisced, he launched into anecdotes of patients and diagnoses. But his laughter rang hollow, too brittle, and the handkerchief with which he repeatedly mopped his brow betrayed more agitation than mirth. And then there was Madame Celeste Duval. She had chosen her seat with precision, half in shadow, half in firelight, as though to remind them she belonged to neither world entirely. Draped in a gown of midnight blue, her every gesture carried grace, her voice low and musical, her smile enigmatic. When she spoke, even the storm seemed to hush a moment to listen. It was Sir Reginald who shattered the fragile veneer of civility. Having emptied yet another glass of brandy, he planted himself squarely before the fire and addressed them all, his voice carrying above the gale outside. "My friends," he began, his tone mocking the very word. "How long it has been since we last gathered, eh? And how curious that fate, or should I say, my invitation, has brought us together once more beneath this roof." No one answered. Glasses were raised, eyes averted, silence pressed in like a hand about the throat. Sir Reginald's smile widened. "You would not have come, I dare say, had you known my purpose. You thought this a weekend of merriment, a social engagement, a chance to forget old ties. But I tell you, such ties are not forgotten, nor such promises." Lady Eleanor exhaled a ribbon of smoke. Her voice, smooth and cutting, broke the silence. "Reginald, you tire us with your dramatics. Must we endure another of your tales of empire and conquest?" He turned sharply toward her, his eyes glittering. "My dear," observing, noted her trembling. Major Blackwood growled, low and dangerous. "We agreed never to speak of it again." "And yet here we are," Sir Reginald retorted, triumphant. "You see, Henry, silence suits me only so long as it is respected. But of late I have wondered whether silence alone protects me. Perhaps I must ensure it otherwise." Madame Duval rose gracefully, gliding toward the center of the room. Her perfume, rich and floral, seemed to cut through the scent of smoke and brandy. Her eyes met Sir Reginald's, unflinching. "You play a dangerous game, monsieur," she murmured. "The spirits do not forgive those who disturb them. There are truths better left in darkness." Sir Reginald sneered. "Ah, yes, the spirits. Your ever-convenient allies. But I recall, madame, an evening in Bombay when those spirits failed you, when the truth of your deception nearly ruined you. You owe your very livelihood to my silence. Think on that." Her lips curved in a smile, but her eyes burned. Perhaps it is not only I who should think on such things. Poirot stirred, his voice gentle yet clear. Forgive me, messieurs, dames, but one cannot help but observe the heaviness in the air. What is this pact of which you speak? A little matter of business? A private misadventure? You will pardon me if I say it has the air of something more consequential. The silence that followed was absolute, save for the wind. 5 pairs of eyes turned to Sir Reginald, who basked in the attention like an actor before an eager audience. He raised his glass once more. "It was 20 years ago in Calcutta," he said slowly, savoring each word. "We were younger then, rash, ambitious, each of us burdened with secrets. We made a choice that bound us together whether we wished it or not, a forbidden pact, forged not of friendship but of necessity. And we swore, every one of us, that it should remain hidden to our graves." He might have missed it. "You promised." Sir Reginald turned to her, his smile cold. "Indeed, my dear, and promises, as I have said, are not forgotten. Neither are betrayals." The evening ended in silence. One by one the guests retired, their footsteps echoing through the draughty halls. The candles guttered, the fire sank into embers, and Greystone Manor settled into uneasy slumber. Yet, in every chamber, hearts raced, minds churned, and shadows whispered. Poirot lingered, staring into the dying fire. He murmured to himself in his native tongue, "Un pacte défendu, c'est une graine empoisonnée, et tôt ou tard, il porte le fruit de la mort." A forbidden pact is a poisoned seed, and sooner or later, it bears the fruit of death. The storm had not abated. If anything, its violence increased as the night deepened. The windows of Greystone Manor rattled and strained under the assault of rain and wind. The old timbers groaned as though the house itself protested the intrusion of the weather. Somewhere distant, a shutter banged relentlessly against stone. The servants, whispering uneasily in the kitchen, crossed themselves whenever thunder cracked across the moor. Within the great house, the guests had retired to their rooms. Silence, however, did not fall easily. Minds were restless, turning over the words spoken by Sir Reginald that evening, weighing the threat implicit in his toast to the forbidden pact. Few slept quickly. Some did not sleep at all. Poirot, in the guest chamber allotted him, a modestly furnished room overlooking the south lawn, prepared himself for bed with his customary ritual. He polished his shoes to a gleam, brushed his mustache with meticulous care, and set his watch upon the bedside table. The storm interested him. Its noise was sufficient to mask movement, and he reflected that secrets have a way of slipping loose under cover of such chaos. Before extinguishing his lamp, he murmured, "Tonight, the house is like a stage before the curtain rises. One waits. One feels that drama approaches." At 11:30, the manor seemed wrapped in uneasy slumber. The corridors lay dark, save for the occasional flicker of a lamp left burnt. Followed, half-clad and disheveled, faces pale with fear. The library doors stood ajar. A draught blew through them, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and rain. Poirot pushed them wide, and the scene revealed itself beneath the flickering glow of a fire burnt low. At the great mahogany desk slumped Sir Reginald Ashcroft. His body sagged over scattered papers, his right hand limp at his side. A dark stain spread across his shirt front, where the bullet had torn through his chest. His eyes, once sharp and domineering, were fixed now in the glassy emptiness of death. The window behind the desk gaped open to the storm. Curtains billowed inward, sodden with rain. Upon the sill clung a scrap of dark fabric, torn and fluttering like a flag of accusation. A half-empty glass of brandy stood beside him, untouched since the fatal moment. Lady Eleanor was the first to cross the threshold. She stopped dead, a strangled cry escaping her throat, one hand pressed to her lips. Her other hand, though, did not tremble. It curled into a fist at her side. Clara Whitmore, who had trailed behind, gave a gasp and buried her face in her hands. She seemed as fragile as porcelain, ready to shatter at a touch. Major Blackwood strode forward, his face grim, and bent over the body. "By God," he muttered, "he's done for." Yet his eyes, Poirot observed, flicked not to the wound, but to the open window, as though calculating something unspoken. Dr. Pembroke, red-faced and sweating, elbowed past to kneel beside the fallen man. With a physician's practiced touch, he felt for a pulse, though the gesture was futile. "Quite dead," he announced unnecessarily, his voice thick. "Shot through the heart. Instantaneous." Madame Duval lingered in the doorway, her dark eyes gleaming strangely in the half-light. She neither cried out nor moved to approach. Instead, she folded her arms, her figure framed by stormlight, and whispered in her accented English, "The spirits warned of this. Death was coming. Now it is here." Here. They looked about. No weapon lay upon the floor, nor upon the desk. The carpet was bare, save for the sprawl of Sir Reginald's lifeless form. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured softly. "A man does not shoot himself and then cause the weapon to vanish. Unless—" He broke off, his eyes narrowing. He stooped, lifting the edge of the rug. Beneath the desk, hidden in shadow, gleamed a small revolver. He did not touch it, but indicated it with a careful gesture. "There, you see? But observe, the angle is wrong. If Sir Reginald fired upon himself, the weapon should have fallen where he sat. To find it beneath the desk, hidden so, that, I think, suggests another hand." A silence fell. Outside, thunder rolled like a drum. Poirot continued. "And more. The window. It is open, though the storm is fierce. Why? To suggest that the assassin fled that way? Perhaps. Yet note, the footprints outside will be obliterated in moments by rain. Convenient, is it not?" He moved closer to the desk. "And this glass of brandy, half finished, would a man on the brink of suicide pause to savour his drink?" "It is curious." Madame Duval's voice cut through. "You mean to say, Monsieur Poirot, that one of us murdered him?" Poirot turned, his dark eyes sweeping over them. "I mean to say only this. Sir Reginald Ashcroft is dead. And in this house there are 6 souls living. One among you, perhaps, knows more than they say." Clara gave a small cry, clutching at the arm of the chair beside her. Major Blackwood's jaw tightened. Lady Eleanor's gaze was fixed upon her husband's body with a curious intensity, as though trying to will it to remain still. Dr. Pembroke coughed, fumbling for his handkerchief. Madame Duval's lips curved in that same enigmatic smile. Poirot raised a hand. "The police must be summoned, but until they arrive, I beg you, messieurs dames, remain calm. No one shall leave this house. For though the manor which only hours earlier had been filled with uneasy laughter and brittle conversation, now felt like a tomb. Poirot did not sleep. While others retired under protest, or under the guise of exhaustion, he lingered. The small Belgian moved about the room with the precision of a surgeon, his eyes gleaming in the flicker of candlelight as he examined each detail. He bent low, studied angles, made soft notes to himself in French. "Always it is the small things," he murmured, pressing his fingertips together. "The large things, they are obvious, yes? A pistol, a window flung open, a man dead at his desk. But it is the small things that betray the truth. A stain upon the rug, a glass not emptied, a clock out of place." At 2:30, the pounding of the knocker at the manor's front doors announced the arrival of Inspector Graves and his men. Graves was a tall, gruff man, with the solid presence of one who had spent years rooting out crime in market towns and industrial cities. His greatcoat was sodden with rain. His moustache drooped heavily. His eyes, though sharp, bore the weariness of interrupted sleep. He greeted Poirot with a firm nod, and wasted no time in turning to the matter at hand. "So this is the scene," Graves said, surveying the library with a slow turn of his head. "Sir Reginald Ashcroft, shot through the heart. Time of death, around midnight, you say?" "Precisely midnight," Poirot corrected gently. "The shot was heard by all." Graves knelt beside the body, his large hands careful as he examined the wound, then the pistol lying partly hidden beneath the desk. He sniffed, frowned. "Powder burns confirm it was fired at close range. Revolver's his own, I take it?" Poirot inclined his head. "So Dr. Pembroke informs me. Yet note, my good inspector, the weapon lies not upon the desk, nor near his hand. Instead, it is hidden beneath. Such placement is unnatural for suicide." Graves grunted. "I'll not call it suicide until I'm satisfied otherwise. Too many of these fine gentry like to play at drama." He looked toward Poirot, one eyebrow raised. "And you, Monsieur Poirot? What brings you here to Devonshire?" Poirot smiled faintly. "A social invitation, nothing more. Yet it seems the invitation carried with it also was fired by a hand in this house. Until we know which, none of you will be permitted to leave." Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "Inspector, you imply we are suspects. Surely you do not imagine." "I imagine nothing, madam. I establish facts. And the fact is, your husband lies dead." Poirot lifted a hand, intervening with gentleness. "Let us proceed with calm, yes? Inspector, perhaps it would assist to consider the physical evidence first." Graves gestured for him to continue. Poirot walked slowly to the open window. The curtains flapped wetly in the storm. He indicated the scrap of fabric caught upon the latch. "Observe this piece of cloth. It is torn, caught as though by haste. Dark, fine material. It does not match Sir Reginald's attire. It must belong to another." Blackwood stepped forward, scowling. "Or perhaps to someone outside. A prowler, a thief." Poirot turned his gaze upon him. "A thief, Major, who braves a storm to steal nothing. For all is here, the silver, the brandy, the jewelry locked upstairs. No, this piece of cloth is a signal. But whether genuine or intended to mislead, we shall see." He moved to the rug before the desk. Stooping, he touched a dark smudge upon the carpet. "Powder," he said softly. "Yet note, it lies here, not upon the desk itself. The shot, therefore, was fired not from the victim's own hand across the desk, but from one standing close, firing downward." Graves rubbed his chin. "So it's murder, then?" "Assuredly," Poirot replied. "But murder dressed to appear perhaps as something else." The inspector motioned toward the servants lingering in the hall. "See that the doors and windows are secured. No one in or out. Now then, statements. Well, start with the lady." Lady Eleanor swept forward, her expression glacial. "I retired at 11, she said. "I was in my chamber when the shot rang out. I emerged only when I heard the commotion in the corridor. Several can attest to this." Poirot bowed slightly. "Indeed, madam. Yet your candlestick clock, I noticed earlier, runs precisely 10 minutes slow. A small matter, perhaps, but such matters interest me greatly." Her eyes flickered,
but she said nothing. Dr. Pembroke was next. He wrung his hands as he spoke. I was in my room.
Yet bravery alone does not prove guilt. We must weigh it carefully. Major Blackwood's voice was harsh. I was in my chamber. The storm was loud. I heard the shot only faintly. I came down as quickly as I could. I've nothing further to add. Poirot's eyebrow rose. And the debts, Major? The debts owed to Sir Reginald, incurred long ago? Did they not give you cause to wish him silent? The Major's jaw clenched. He had no proof. He only liked to sneer, that's all. Lastly, Madame Duval glided forward. She clasped her hands and bowed her head theatrically. I was alone in my room, communing with the spirits. When the pistol fired, I thought at first it was thunder. Only later did I learn the truth. Poirot's gaze rested upon her. And yet, madame, this scrap of fabric resembles closely the shawl you wore at dinner. A coincidence, perhaps, but coincidences, they make me very curious. She smiled faintly, showing no fear. Perhaps the house itself tore it from me. Old places are full of tricks. Inspector Graves snorted. That will do. You'll each give a full written statement. Until then, you'll remain under watch. The suspects withdrew one by one, their footsteps heavy with unease. When the library was empty, save for Poirot and Graves, the inspector turned to him. Well, monsieur, you've the gift of drawing out lies. But every one of them has reason to kill the man. Which is it, then? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Patience, my friend. Already the picture begins to form. The brandy, half finished, the clock 10 minutes slow, the scent of jasmine in the air when I entered, faint but present. These things they whisper, but the voice is not yet clear. He straightened his tie, smoothed his moustache, and looked once more upon the lifeless body of Sir Reginald. We have entered the labyrinth, Inspector. But the centre, the truth, it waits, and Hercule Poirot, he never fails to find the way. Outside, dawn's first pale light struggled through the storm clouds. Inside, the investigation had only begun. Chapter 5. The Web of Suspicions. The rain at Greystone Manor ceased at dawn, but its aftermath left the estate shrouded in a strange, melancholy stillness. The gardens glistened with moisture, each branch and leaf dripping with silver tears. The gravel paths were sodden, and a mist clung low across the lawns, curling around the hedgerows like an ancient veil. Within the manor, the storm had left its impression upon both walls and minds. Silence hung heavy, as though even the portraits in the hall knew that death had visited in the night. Poirot, however, was at his brightest. Rising early, he had arranged his mustache to impeccable precision, polished his shoes to their mirror sheen, and consumed a modest breakfast of rolls, chocolate, and a steaming tisane. Inspector Graves, meanwhile, was less cheerful. He had spent much of the night pacing, interrogating servants, and trying to reconcile the many motives that swirled through the house. By 9 o'clock, Poirot declared that it was time for the next stage of inquiry. You see, mon cher Graves, he said with a delicate wave of his napkin, last night, the suspects gave to us the story that is expected, the story rehearsed, the alibi constructed. But the morning, it is cruel to those who lie. Fatigue loosens the lips, the little details are forgotten. Today, we begin to pull at the threads, and the web, it will unravel. Graves grunted, swallowing a mouthful of coffee as though it were medicine. A web it may be, but each one of these people's a spider. I can't tell yet which is the hungriest. They began with Lady Eleanor. Her chamber, situated at the east wing, was austere in its elegance. Heavy velvet draperies blocked out the weak sunlight, and the air smelled faintly of lavender water. She greeted them with a cold civility, clad now in black silk.
Widowhood seemed to have wrapped around her like a cloak she had been expecting to wear. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "you told us last night you retired at 11, that you were in your chamber when the shot rang out. May I ask, what occupied you until then?" "I was reading," Lady Eleanor replied, her voice clipped. "A novel, French if you must know." Poirot inclined his head. "Ah, but of course. And you—"
Poirot's eyes shone with curiosity. "Sometimes, madame, duty can become the heaviest chain of all." They left her chamber with more questions than answers. Dr. Charles Pembroke was found pacing the gallery, a medical journal tucked beneath his arm. His sandy hair was disheveled, his spectacles askew. He looked up with nervous energy as they approached. "I have nothing more to add," he said quickly. "I told you I was in my chamber." Poirot smiled. Yes, but you see, it is not for you to decide when the matter is complete. It is for us." He gestured toward the doctor's hands. They trembled faintly. "You were close to Sir Reginald, were you not?" Pembroke gave a bitter laugh. "Close? Hardly. He held over me a foolish indiscretion from my youth. An error, yes, but long past. He threatened to ruin me with it." "Ruin you?" Graves said. "You're a respected man, Pembroke. A word from Ashcroft wouldn't destroy that." "You do not understand," Pembroke said heatedly. "Reputation is everything in my profession. A whisper of malpractice, of dishonor, it would finish me." Poirot's voice was mild. "And so, to preserve your reputation, you would risk everything by taking a life?" Pembroke paled. "I am not a murderer. Do you not see? He enjoyed watching us suffer, each of us. That was his sport. But to kill? No, I could not." Poirot tilted his head. "Yet, Doctor, you were swift to declare him dead without attempt at resuscitation. A man of your training might have tried." Pembroke's lips thinned. "You mock me. The wound was mortal. I knew it instantly." Poirot made no reply, merely nodded, as though a small piece of a larger puzzle had been confirmed. They found Clara in the conservatory, surrounded by hothouse orchids and exotic ferns. Her frail frame seemed almost to vanish among the greenery. She sat with a book unopened in her lap, her pale fingers tracing the cover absently. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said warmly, "what a peaceful place this—" The smoking room, nursing a glass of brandy despite the hour. His broad shoulders were tense, his military bearing somewhat undermined by the shadows beneath his eyes. "You again," he muttered as Poirot and Graves entered. "Haven't you squeezed us dry enough?" "On the contrary," Poirot said cheerfully, "I have not yet begun." Blackwood scowled. "Well, make it quick. I've little patience for games." Poirot settled into a chair opposite him. "Major, you owe debts to Sir Reginald. Gambling debts, are they not?" Blackwood's jaw tightened. "What of it?" "Debts," Poirot said, "are like ghosts. They follow, they haunt, and sometimes they push a man to desperate action." "I may be desperate, but I'm no cowardly assassin." He slammed the glass upon the table. "If I wanted Ashcroft dead, I'd have faced him squarely, not crept about like a thief." Poirot leaned forward. "But, you see, Major, murder is not always about courage or cowardice. It is about opportunity. And you were close, very close when the shot was fired." Blackwood's face darkened. So were half a dozen others. "You'll not pin this on me." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, but I do not pin, Major. I unravel. It is different, you see." Lastly, they visited Madame Duval, who occupied a guest chamber draped in silks and scented with incense. She received them with a languid smile, reclining upon a chaise as though the house were not shadowed by death,
but by some exotic intrigue of her own invention. "Messieurs," she purred, "have you come to seek wisdom from the spirits again? Or to accuse me of crimes?" Poirot bowed gallantly. "Madame, it is not I who accuse. It is the evidence that whispers. The scrap of fabric, dark, fine, torn at the window latch. It resembles so closely the shawl you wore at dinner." "Perhaps," she said with a shrug, "or perhaps not. One must not place too much faith in appearances." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "On the contrary, madame, appearances are often the most revealing of all. A shawl torn in haste, a scent of jasmine lingering in the library, these things tell a tale if one knows how to read it." She laughed lightly. "Then read, Monsieur Poirot, my friend. Of truth disguised. Someone has sought to construct a scene, a tableau as the French would say. But they have been careless. The threads do not match. And Hercule Poirot, he will tug until the whole garment comes undone." The inspector sighed. "Then we've work yet to do." "Yes," Poirot murmured. "The web grows tighter. Soon it will catch the one who spun it." The rain began again outside, soft at first, then building. The sound filled the library like the ticking of a great clock, marking time, waiting for revelation. Chapter 6. Shadows of the Past. The storm had passed, yet Greystone Manor remained steeped in gloom. The sky was pewter gray, and the light that filtered through the mullioned windows of the great hall seemed colorless, drained of all vitality. It was as though the very house, in mourning for its master, had surrendered its pulse. But Hercule Poirot was not one to surrender. He stood at the hearth in the library, his polished shoes gleaming, his mustache symmetrical as ever, his little gray eyes bright with intensity. Inspector Graves, seated in a heavy leather chair, was less immaculate. His greatcoat lay discarded over the arm, and his boots bore the stains of wet soil from his morning inspection of the grounds. He rubbed his temple with a weary hand. "You've walked us in circles, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "Statements, motives, scraps of cloth, clocks running slow. All clever, no doubt, but I need something tangible. A name. A hand that pulled the trigger." Poirot spread his arms. "Patience, mon cher Graves. The murderer is like a spider who spins too swiftly. In his haste, he leaves strands that betray him. We must study the pattern of his weaving. And while we wait," Graves growled, "the guilty one sits warm by the fire, smug in his secrets." Poirot shook his head. "Ah, no. He does not sit smug. He trembles, even if he hides it. Already he knows Poirot has seen too much." Poirot requested access to Sir Reginald's private study, a room adjoining the library, locked and sealed since the body was removed. Graves grumbled, but produced the key. The study was a place of severity. Bookshelves climbed. Signed, "Yours eternally, G." The inspector swore under his breath. G for Graves? Good God. Poirot chuckled. "No, mon ami, another G. Perhaps Geoffrey, Gerald, or George? But one thing is certain. Lady Eleanor was not faithful." Graves whistled low. "So Sir Reginald knew, and held it against her?" Poirot nodded. "It explains her coldness, and perhaps her hatred." They searched further. Another letter emerged, this one bearing the name of Dr. Pembroke. Written years before, it begged for silence regarding a failed procedure, a patient lost, a scandal avoided. Reginald's annotations in the margin were merciless. "He owes me his life." Graves slammed the desk with his fist. Blackmail, then. Ashcroft held them all by the throat. "Precisely," Poirot said. "We begin to see the shape of the pact." It was Clara Whitmore who next occupied Poirot's attention. He found her in the morning room, gazing listlessly at the gardens through misted glass. Her pale hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes bore the distant look of one who drifts between memory and dread. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said softly, taking a chair near hers, "I would ask you of your past." She started. "My past?" "Yes. For Sir Reginald, he was not content to torment you in the present only. He held something over you, something of your family." "What was it?" Clara hesitated, her throat working. At last she whispered, "It was my brother. He made a foolish investment years ago. Sir Reginald saved him, or so he claimed. He demanded repayment, a sum impossible for us. I entered his household as companion to work off the debt. But it was never enough. He made sure of that." Poirot's expression softened. "So he bound you, as surely as a prisoner?" "Yes." Her eyes filled with tears. "But I did not kill him, monsieur. I wished him dead, I confess it, but I could not. When the shot rang out, I was paralyzed with fear." Poirot studied her closely. Her trembling
himself. It was late afternoon when Poirot sought Madame Duval. She received him in her chamber, incense curling through the air, cards spread upon a velvet cloth. She smiled languidly. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, have you come to consult the spirits?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "No, madame, I have come to consult you. For the spirits, they are liars, but you, I think, are also a liar." Her eyes widened slightly. "How bold you are!" Poirot leaned forward. "Your name is not Duval, nor are you French. You are English, are you not? I detected it last evening. When you were startled, the accent slipped." She laughed lightly, but her eyes hardened. "And if it is true, then you are here under false pretenses. Why? What link have you to Sir Reginald?" Her mask faltered. "Years ago," she admitted, "he ruined me. I was an actress, ambitious, foolish. He promised patronage, then abandoned me with nothing but scandal. I left the country, reinvented myself, but when I heard of this gathering, I could not resist. I came back to confront him, to see him cower." Poirot studied her keenly. "And did he cower?" She looked away. "Number." He laughed, as he always had. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "So you tore your shawl upon the window in your haste. You were near the scene." She flinched. "I was outside the library, yes, but when the shot came, I fled. I swear I did not fire it." That evening, Poirot gathered Inspector Graves and spread upon the library table the evidence collected: the torn scrap of shawl, the bundle of letters, the doctor's trembling notes, the accounts of debts. "Do you not see, Graves?" Poirot exclaimed. "This is not a murder of passion, nor of impulse. It is a murder born of a pact. Sir Reginald had bound them all. Lady Eleanor with her letters, Pembroke with his scandal, Clara with her debt, Blackwood with his dishonour, Madame Duval with her disgrace. Each was his prisoner." Graves frowned, and Sir hearts were heavy and their nerves frayed. The little Belgian had declared it essential to the psychology of the case. Inspector Graves, though sceptical, allowed it. He had learned by now that Poirot's eccentricities often concealed a method as precise as clockwork. The dining room, lit by tall silver candelabra, flickered with shadows that seemed to breathe along the panelled walls. The long table gleamed with crystal and porcelain, yet the atmosphere was funereal. Where once Sir Reginald Ashcroft had presided with cutting remarks and imperious command,
His chair now stood conspicuously empty. It was a vacancy that seemed louder than any voice. Poirot took his place midway along the table, his eyes alive with calculation. To his left sat Lady Eleanor, draped in black lace, her chin tilted in cold defiance. Beside her was Clara Whitmore, pale and subdued, avoiding the gaze of all. Opposite them lounged Madame Duval, exotic silks rustling, her smile a painted mask, concealing tension beneath. At the far end, Major Blackwood carved savagely at his meat, his great shoulders hunched with suppressed ire. Dr. Pembroke, perspiring, picked at his food with distracted fingers, as though each bite might betray him. Inspector Graves observed from the corner, a notebook resting on his knee. His eyes darted from one guest to another, a hunter watching for the twitch of a snare. Poirot raised his glass. "Mesdames et messieurs, you will forgive me. Tonight's dinner, it is not to celebrate, but to observe. For in the company of food and candlelight, the true self emerges. Masks, they slip when the wine is poured, when the nerves relax, when the silences grow long, and Hercule Poirot, he watches." No one spoke at first. The only sound was the clink of cutlery and the restless crackle of the fire. At last, Lady Eleanor broke the silence. "If this is an interrogation, Monsieur Poirot, it is a cruel one. You seek to expose us in the very place where my husband once ruled. You dishonor his memory." Poirot inclined his head. "Forgive me, madame, but I think you did not love your husband's memory. Perhaps you feel yet. I simply observe." The candles flickered, as though stirred by unseen breath. Clara set down her fork with trembling fingers. Her voice was a whisper. "If we are to speak truth, then let it be spoken. He ruined lives. He ruined mine. He said my family owed him, that I must serve here until my very soul was spent. I wished him dead, yes, I admit it. But wishing is not the same as doing." Lady Eleanor's gaze was sharp. "You wished him dead? How convenient, then, that he is so." Clara flinched. "You think me capable?" Madame Duval's smile was thin. "Capable, yes. Willing, perhaps not. But we are all capable of more than we know, when cornered." Poirot spread his hands. "Bravo. Already the truths emerge. You see, Inspector Graves? The mask of civility, it cracks. Soon we shall see the face beneath." The inspector scribbled furiously in his notebook. The servants, moving silently in and out with courses, cast fearful glances upon the table. They too felt the tension, as though violence still lurked in the corners of the room, waiting to strike again. Poirot continued with delicate calm. "Sir Reginald, he held each of you by a chain. Lady Eleanor, your letters of passion to another man. Dr. Pembroke, your youthful mistake, hidden only by his silence. Major Blackwood, your debts, bought and wielded. Mademoiselle Clara, your family's obligation, twisted into servitude. Madame Duval, your disgrace upon the stage, exploited for his amusement. Each of you, bound." Gasps and murmurs rippled along the table. "How dare you?" Lady Eleanor hissed. "Lies!" Pembroke stammered. "Those letters were destroyed." He stopped short, realizing too late what he had confessed. Poirot smiled faintly. "Destroyed? Perhaps not. He kept them all, Doctor, in his study, tied neatly with ribbon." Pembroke's face drained of color. Blackwood growled. "So he had us all in his pocket. What of it? That doesn't prove who fired the shot." "Just so," Poirot said. "Yet it proves why any of you might have wished to." The meal continued, though few ate. Footsteps and their dread. Inspector Graves remained, closing his notebook with a snap. "You've stirred them like hornets in a nest, Poirot.
but you've not yet shown me the wasp with the sting." Poirot smiled. "Patience, mon ami. The sting, it is there. Tomorrow we pluck it." Outside, the night pressed close against the windows. Within, the fire dwindled to embers, and above the manor, the air seemed heavy with secrets, waiting only for the moment when Poirot would pull them into the light. Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm. The dawn broke with a pallid light over Greystone Manor. Fog lay heavy upon the lawns, rolling like a shroud over the clipped hedgerows and gravestones of dew upon the grass. The house itself seemed to shrink back from the day, its tall windows dark, as though resentful of the morning's intrusion. Within, the air was still, heavy with anticipation and dread. Poirot rose early. His appearance was, as ever, immaculate. The moustache waxed to perfection, the tie precisely knotted, the shoes polished until they gleamed like black mirrors. Yet behind those serene grey eyes, his little grey cells stirred with restless energy. The hour of revelation drew nearer. But first he must test, prod, unsettle. For a guilty man or woman would betray themselves only under the proper pressure. Inspector Graves, bleary-eyed from a night of fruitless note-taking, joined him at breakfast. The inspector attacked a plate of bacon with weary gusto, while Poirot daintily consumed a single boiled egg. "You kept them all on edge last night," Graves muttered. "I've never seen such a display, accusations flying like bullets." "Eh bien," Poirot replied serenely, "bullets they may be, but of words, not lead. Yet words can wound, can they not? A guilty one, he feels their sting more than the innocent. Watch them, mon ami. See who falters when the silence grows too long, who protests too quickly. In such small details lies the truth." Graves grunted, unconvinced, and reached for more toast. By mid-morning, Poirot had summoned all the household once again to the library, the very room where Sir Reginald's life seemed almost to revel in the tension, as though the manor had become her stage. Major Blackwood stamped heavily into the room, his boots muddy, his great shoulders squared in defiance. He leaned against the mantel, arms folded, glaring at all as though they were adversaries in a campaign. Dr. Pembroke entered last, his face blotched, his fingers twitching, a faint sheen of sweat already upon his brow, though the morning was chill. Poirot stood before them, hands clasped delicately, mustache gleaming. Inspector Graves loomed nearby, notebook ready. "My friends," Poirot began, "today we gather not merely to remember Sir Reginald, but to untangle the knots he left behind. Last night, at dinner, we saw how each of you was bound by him. This morning, we shall look closer. For one among you, the chain was too heavy to bear, and so you struck. But in striking, you left behind the little clues, the contradictions. The truth, it whispers already. We need only listen." He turned suddenly to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, you were the first to retire on the night of the crime, were you not? You claimed to be in your chambers at 10:30, yet the maid saw you descend again at 11. A flicker of color rose to Eleanor's cheeks. "I wished for a book. Must I account for every step I take in my own house?" "Not at all," Poirot said gently. "But you passed near the library, did you not? You heard the voices, perhaps even entered." Her lips tightened. "I did not." "Eh bien," Poirot moved on, as though satisfied, though his eyes gleamed with quiet knowledge. He turned to Dr. Pembroke. "Doctor, you said you were in your chamber preparing notes when the shot was heard. Yet these notes," he held up a sheaf of papers from the desk, "were already upon Sir Reginald's study table, annotated in his hand. How explain you this?" Pembroke stammered. I must have left them there earlier, without recollection." "Or," Poirot said softly. "You brought them, that night, to plead again with Sir Reginald, to beg his silence, perhaps. And he refused. Is it not so?" The doctor's face blanched, and the maid see a figure slip back into the house from the terrace a few minutes after the shot. Duval's eyes glinted. "Because someone wished me seen, Monsieur Poirot. Someone who knew I lingered by that window. Do not mistake me for a fool's puppet." A murmur rippled among the group. Tension coiled in the air like a tightening spring. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Enough. Already the web trembles. Already we see how each alibi frays. But there is more. Always there is more. And tomorrow, mes amis, I shall reveal it all. For tonight I must consider, I must arrange the little grey cells. But remember this, one of you carries upon your conscience not only the weight of hatred, but of murder. And Hercule Poirot, he shall not permit such a crime to remain hidden." That night, while the house lay restless in uneasy slumber, Poirot remained awake in the library, the fire burning low. He arranged the scraps of evidence upon the desk, the shawl fragment, the packet of letters, the doctor's plea, the account of debts, the timelines written in neat Belgian script. He studied them as a musician studies notes, seeking the harmony amid discord. "It is not enough," he murmured to himself. "They all had cause, they all had opportunity, but only one had the courage or the desperation to act. The pact, it was real, but the pact was broken. Who then betrayed the others? Who risked exposure, knowing the rest would be bound to silence?" He closed his eyes, picturing each face. Eleanor's icy mask, Clara's tremulous innocence, Duval's theatrical bravado, Blackwood's defiance, Pembroke's sweat-drenched guilt. Shadows of the past, every one. And then, faint as a whisper, the clue emerged. A word spoken too hastily, a step unaccounted, a contradiction unnoticed by all but him. Poirot's eyes snapped open, his moustache quivered. "Mais oui," he whispered, "it is so simple. The truth, it has been staring us in the face." He smiled then, a smile of triumph tinged with sorrow. "Tomorrow the storm shall break." And outside, as though in answer, thunder rumbled distantly across the moors. Finger. "Non, non, mon cher. One does not pluck fruit before it is ripe. Today, the harvest comes, but we must do it à la Poirot, with the order, the symmetry, the elegance. The murderer will not merely be named, he shall be revealed." Graves snorted. "You love your theatre." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And what is murder, Inspector, but theatre? Of the darkest kind. Today, we draw the curtain back." The suspects were summoned at noon. They filed in one by one, each bearing the strain of sleepless nights and gnawing dread. Lady Eleanor was first, her widow's weeds of black velvet clinging like armor. Her face was composed, but her eyes, those icy blue eyes, were ringed with sleepless shadows. Clara Whitmore slipped in behind her, pale and wan, her nervous hands twisting a handkerchief to threads. She seemed as fragile as porcelain, yet beneath her timidity, Poirot sensed a core of something harder. Madame Duval followed, swathed in silks of crimson and gold, her perfume heavy, her painted lips curved in a mocking smile. She looked, Poirot thought, like a performer savouring her final act. Major Blackwood stamped in heavily, his boots leaving clods of damp earth upon the carpet. He took his place by the window, arms folded, jaw clenched, a soldier prepared for an ambush. Dr. Pembroke entered last, his hands shaking so that the papers he carried
fluttered like frightened birds. His collar was askew, his spectacles slipping. Sweat beaded upon his brow despite the chill. Poirot regarded them all with grave courtesy. "Mesdames, messieurs, you know why you are here. Sir Reginald Ashcroft is dead, shot in his library, the very room where we stand. One among you pulled the trigger. One among you bears the guilt. And Hercule Poirot, he shall reveal that one." A stir of unease rippled through the company. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "But before I name, we must exile you into exile, forced you to invent another self. You returned, not merely for profit, but for vengeance." Duval inclined her head, her smile brittle. Poirot spread his hands. "Thus we see. Each of you was bound by Sir Reginald. Together you formed a circle of silence, a forbidden pact. Yet such a pact cannot hold. One of you broke it. One of you fired the shot." Graves stepped forward. "Out with it then, Poirot. Which one?" Poirot raised a finger. "Patience, mon ami. The truth must be savored." Poirot moved to the window. "Consider the scene. Sir Reginald sat here at his desk. The shot was fired close. Powder burns mark the wound. Therefore, the killer was not outside, but within." Blackwood stirred. "Then why the footprints beneath the window? You said yourself they were a soldier's boots." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, Major, a clever misdirection. The boots were placed there deliberately, after the fact, to cast suspicion upon a man of your kind. But Poirot, he does not leap, he observes. The mud upon those boots was fresh, but the windowsill bore no trace. The killer wished us to think the shot came from outside, but he forgot the little details." He turned sharply to Madame Duval. "And the torn shawl, oui, it was yours. But torn not as you fled, no. Torn earlier, perhaps days before, and planted to incriminate you. You see, Madame, the killer was cunning." Duval let out a low laugh. "So I am exonerated. Très bien. Then who planted it?" Poirot ignored the question, his eyes fixed on Pembroke. "Doctor, you claim to have been in your chamber, yet your notes were found upon Sir Reginald's desk, annotated by him that very night. You brought them, desperate for his mercy. But mercy, he had none. You left in despair." Pembroke's lips moved soundlessly. Poirot pivoted to Lady Eleanor. "And you, Madame, you claimed to retire early. Yet the maid saw you descend again. You passed the library. Perhaps you entered. Yet you did not." "The shot was after 11. Where were you in that hour? You claimed to walk the grounds. But the boots, mon cher Major, they betrayed you. They were not muddy until after the murder. You planted those tracks beneath the window to mislead us, and when confronted, you could not explain." Blackwood's jaw worked furiously. "Circumstance?" Poirot shook his head. "No, there is more. The powder burns showed the shot was close. Only a man bold, unflinching, accustomed to violence, would fire at such range. Sir Reginald was no fool. He would not have allowed most of you near him with a pistol drawn. But you, Major, his fellow soldier, his drinking companion, he trusted. You could approach, raise the gun, and fire before he realized." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And most damning, Clara. She crept to the door. She saw you leave the library, the pistol still smoking in your hand. She did not speak, for she feared you. But her silence spoke volumes. All eyes turned to Clara, who sat, trembling. At last she whispered, 'It is true. I saw him. I was too afraid to tell.'
Blackwood roared, overturning a chair. "Lies! She's lying to save herself." Inspector Graves leapt forward, hand upon his revolver. "Enough, Blackwood. You're finished." The Major's shoulders heaved. He looked from one face to another, the fury in his eyes dimming into despair. At last he sank into the chair, head bowed. "Yes," he muttered hoarsely. "I killed him. He'd ruined me, sold me like a horse at market, demanded every penny I had, and when it was gone demanded more. My honor, my career, it was ashes. I couldn't stand it any longer." He raised haunted eyes. "So I shot him, and for the first time in years, I felt free." Silence fell. Only the rain pattered softly against the window. Poirot bowed his head. "You see, mes amis, the truth, it always comes. Major Blackwood broke the forbidden pact. He struck the blow, believing himself free. But freedom bought with murder is no freedom at all." Inspector Graves stepped forward. "Edward Blackwood, I arrest you for the murder of Sir Reginald Ashcroft." The Major menace in the death of Sir Reginald, and another in the capture of Major Blackwood, still seemed weighted with shadows. In the great library, Hercule Poirot sat once more at the massive oak desk, the seat of power so recently occupied by the murdered baronet. Inspector Graves stood nearby, notebook in hand, his features grave but oddly softened. The surviving guests, Lady Eleanor, Clara Whitmore, Dr. Pembroke, and Madame Duval, were assembled once again, though no longer as suspects but as weary survivors of a dreadful ordeal. Poirot rose slowly, his silhouette small yet commanding in the flickering firelight. His mustache gleamed like polished silver, his eyes shone with quiet triumph. "Mesdames, Monsieur," he began, his voice carrying with calm authority, "you have witnessed the fall of Sir Reginald Ashcroft and of Major Edward Blackwood, the man who sought to deliver himself from bondage by the pistol. You have heard his confession, and justice will follow. But before we part, there remains one duty of Hercule Poirot: to arrange the facts, to draw the pattern, to lay bare the truth entire. For though the murderer has been taken, the story is not yet finished. You deserve to see it whole." He paced slowly before the hearth. "Let us begin with Sir Reginald himself. He was a man of wealth, of position, of iron will. But beneath the surface, what was he truly? Not a guardian, not a benefactor, but a blackmailer. He gathered secrets as a miser gathers gold, and with them he bought power. Each of you," his finger swept the room, "was in his thrall. Lady Eleanor, through letters of passion. Dr. Pembroke, through a professional disgrace. Mademoiselle Clara, through a debt never intended to be repaid. Madame Duval, through a ruined name. And Major Blackwood, through debts of honor. Thus he bound you all into what I have called the Forbidden Pact, an unspoken conspiracy of silence, born not of loyalty, but of fear." Lady Eleanor's lips parted in bitter agreement. "Fear, yes, fear that if we spoke, our lives would be destroyed." "Not alone in guilt. Each of you, in your heart, wished for Sir Reginald's death. Each of you dreamt of freedom purchased at the price of his silence. In that sense, you are all conspirators of the mind. But it is important to distinguish, mes amis, between thought and deed. The law punishes the deed, but the conscience, the conscience, she punishes both." Dr. Pembroke, his head bowed, spoke hoarsely. "Then I am condemned, for I prayed for his death nightly. My cowardice spared me the act, but not the stain." Poirot approached him gently. "No, doctor. You are condemned only if you refuse to learn.
See in this the lesson. A secret kept is a poison swallowed. Better to confess one's shame and suffer the cure than to live in bondage until it destroys. The doctor covered his face with trembling hands. Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor. "And you, madame? You deceived me at first, saying you retired early. In truth, you descended after the shot to reclaim your letters. You feared scandal more than justice. Yet I do not judge too harshly. You were the prisoner of a loveless marriage, your dignity crushed. You sought only to preserve a fragment of yourself." Eleanor's proud mask faltered. "You see too much, Monsieur Poirot." He inclined his head. "It is my métier, madame." He faced Clara last, and his tone softened. "Mademoiselle Clara, you were perhaps the most innocent, yet you carried the heaviest fear. You saw the Major leave the library, pistol smoking. You kept silent, terrified he might turn upon you. And so you suffered the torment of knowing truth yet being unable to speak it. That silence was not cowardice, it was the silence of survival. You must not reproach yourself." Tears slid down her cheeks and she whispered, "You release me, monsieur. Thank you." Poirot drew himself up, addressing them all. And so we arrive at the moral for Hercule Poirot. He does not solve crimes only for the courts. He solves them for the soul. What does this tragedy teach us? That secrets are chains. They bind, they corrode, they destroy. Sir Reginald forged those chains and made of himself a
We'll punish him. Yes. But each here must walk their own road, to freedom or to further bondage. That choice, it is theirs. He looked once more at the assembled company, his gaze lingering on each in turn. Then he bowed with courtly grace. "Mesdames, Monsieur, Inspector, Hercule Poirot has finished his task. Justice has been served. The curtain falls." And with that, he took his hat and cane, smoothed his mustache, and departed the library. The storm raged on outside, but within Greystone Manor, a strange calm settled, as though the house itself had exhaled at last. The forbidden pact was broken, the tyrant laid low, the murderer unmasked. What remained was only silence, and the faint echo of Poirot's words, lingering like a benediction upon the air.